LaxFactor podcast. What is up, people? We are now live. This is the fifth LaxFactor live stream that we're doing here. I still never get used to the delay. It always screws me up. So what is happening this week is we have a huge slate of games to talk about. We have Big Ten play starting this week, so that's big. We've got Ohio State at Hopkins. That's going to be a big game, and it's going to be a weird situation for Hopkins because they're going to be the underdogs for once in this matchup. We have Penn State at Rutgers. Rutgers trying to prove that they can, still be a juggernaut offensively and just as a team in general without Grant Ament. We have Michigan at Maryland, which my prediction is that's going to go Maryland's way. That should be an easy game for Maryland, albeit I'm not calling for a blowout or anything. I just think they'll control it. And then we have some Big East action, Georgetown, Villanova. Virginia is going to play at Loyola. We've got Army at Syracuse, blah, blah, blah. We got a bunch of games here, so we'll get into all of those. As we wait for people to file in here, we will kind of just talk about what happened this week, what happened in the news, and then we'll get into previewing the games. And I got a little bit of a film review that I end up wanting to do as well. So before I get into all of that, though, as always, subscribe. If you end up watching this, subscribe and do that whole rigmarole because that's important. We're approaching 10,000 subscribers. We are trying to get to that plateau of 10,000 subscribers. And then, as always, you can go to laxfactor.com and you can get yourself crap, hoodies, hats, and all that other good stuff as well. So news this week. Jeff Teat. It broke via the post-game podcast. I think that was this week. I might even be screwing it up, and that may have even been last week's news. I think it broke over the weekend last week as I was doing the live stream, and it turned out to be totally false. The post-game had broke news that Jeff Teat was going to transfer to Denver, only to have someone from Inside Lacrosse, probably Terry Foy, post later that he had gotten word that none of that is true, so on and so forth. And they've kind of scrubbed the internet of that ever happening. But I thought that was funny. And I think it's funny, and I'm not condemning them. Breaking news is tough business. I had once tried to break some news regarding a certain Maryland coach possibly ditching for Navy, and that turned out to be true. In my case, I was just lucky that nobody saw that I had put that out there publicly. In the post-games case, at Ocello and Malloy's case, everybody kind of saw it, and it just spread like wildfire through the lacrosse world, and then it turned out it wasn't true at all, so that stunk for them. A little bit more news, too. The Ivy League is officially announced. We all knew they were going to shut the season down, but they officially shut the season down. But they left it open for for some exhibition play, maybe some regular games. I don't know. They're going to lose their AQ. They are not going to end up having a team in the tournament, and that's going to stink. But they may leave the door open for some of these teams that are playing, depending on their own campus rules, to maybe get out there and play some exhibition games. I don't know what that'll look like. It was also broke that they had turned down the opportunity to have like an Ivy League bubble where they could get the men's and women's regular season in and their tournaments in to try to keep their AQ and get a team into the tournament or get team or teams into the tournaments. They turned that down. Everybody was mad that they turned that down, but I felt like that was going to be a hard thing to pull off. It was always going to be a hard sell because it only involved lacrosse and not other sports. So I didn't blame them for turning that down, and it was a really sweet offer, but what are you going to do? Rob Pennell got traded. Another thing broke by the post game, and that was a little bit hairy because Pennell got traded to a team that Ocello, I believe, plays for. And so that was weird. It was weird. It was funny because they put a video up of Pennell being surprised that he got traded, but it's like, we're living in a world, the pro sports world. Lacrosse wants to be more pro sports like. So getting traded is just going to be part of that, especially an aged star. It isn't like Rob Pennell is in his prime right now. I mean, he's a beast still, and he can still play lacrosse, but he is not, one of the best 3 to 5 attackmen in that league. That's definitely the younger guys, I think, to get that. But, he's a legend anyway. A couple of NFL guys also decided to take their stab at the PLL. Chris Hogan of New England Patriots and Super Bowl fame, and then some other dude that I've never heard of before. And then Ocello was, all over Twitter saying he was the best football player in the PLL, which I thought was funny. So that was all good. Scotty Rogers, he got released, the keeper there. I forget I don't even, PLL, I still don't keep the roster straight. I watched every PLL game that was on last year, but I still have no idea because because I have no allegiance to any one team or whatnot, but I did see Scotty Rogers got released. That stunk, so best of luck to him. I think by the end of the show, maybe we'll do some Las Vegas lines. We'll look at the lines and maybe do a little bit of picking from the Lax Vegas lines. I got it queued up so you can look at it here as we go through. Let me hit the questions real quick, and then we're going to get into talking about the Ohio State game today, where Ohio State's traveling to Homewood to take on Hopkins. First question, Steve D. Do you buy into the new era for Hopkins? Hopkins has always seemed to be favored in the spotlight, whether it be TV, airtime, national news, and media exposure based on their past success. Yeah, I mean, I buy into the new era in the sense that Hopkins is still going to be Hopkins, and I think that they're going to be still just as good of a lacrosse. I think they're going to be a much improved lacrosse team from last year, simply because they got Joey Epstein back and healthy. In terms of having a new coach, a new era, Petro was Hopkins for so long, especially people my age. We grew up, Petro had ditched Cornell and ended up at Hopkins, and we grew up watching Petro coach Hopkins. And if you're a Cuse fan like me, or any team that rivaled Hopkins, and Petro was part of the evil empire that you loved to hate. And then as I got older and started getting into this whole game, then you become more of a fan of Petro. Even where before I got into this whole thing, where I've watched so much lacrosse now, I can't help but be a fan of a lot of the teams I watch. I was as a coach, you end up respecting what Petro has done and what he did at Hopkins. So I do buy into the new era. I think a new coach brings in a new perspective, a new culture. I think it excites the alum to a degree once they get over the anger associated with maybe getting rid of the guy that was their coach. But I do buy into it. Let's see here. Michael Bacaletz. I don't know how to pronounce that. Maybe you got to spell it phonetically for me. Western Mass in the building. Repping Western Massachusetts. I wonder how cold you guys have it. Way to get the ACC games online without cable. There is not a way to get the ACC games online without cable. You can go to Reddit streams, but I don't know if the nerds do if you look for Reddit streams, you sometimes can find the feeds that way. Let's see here. Doug McDonald. Don't know if you want to touch on this, but a huge women's lax game at noon. Cuse Loyola, two very talented powerhouses opening up their seasons. Well, we just touched on it. We got Cuse men tomorrow playing Army, and we have apparently the Cuse women playing Loyola. So that's happening today here. I'm sure that probably that might even be on TV, I believe here. All right. Let's stop with the questions here. You guys can keep asking questions like crazy. I will revisit the questions section. I'm actually going to highlight the questions here so I can find my placelet next time. So let's talk right now about Ohio State at Hopkins. Ohio State, I have been very critical of them over the years because I feel like I always complained because they'd start out like 5-0, 6-0, but their schedule was really weak, and then they would get into Big Ten play, and they always had a solid record at the end of the season, decent ranking. They could get into the tournament here and there, but I didn't feel that the quality of the team they put on the field was always represented by that schedule. I felt like you play a cupcake schedule early and then you get into the Big Ten play and you split Big Ten play. That's not as impressive as what a lot of people made it out to be. So I've always kind of been a player hater on Ohio State a little bit. Last year, I was a little bit more of a believer because of guys like Trey LeClaire, Jack Myers, Jackson Reed. All of those guys offensively are back. You end up having Justin Inacio at the faceoff dot, 65.5% last year in the beginning part of their season. Best short stick D-mid in the game, or at least one of the best three short stick D-mids in the game in Ryan Tarafanko. He had 30 GBs last year, 2 goals, and 4 helpers. His game has evolved, and it'll be interesting to see what he does this year, because I think you'll end up seeing him put up some Boku points, booking it between the boxes, and just being a nasty two-way mid. Jeff Henrick, LSM, very good LSM, 7 caused turnovers, 19 GBs, a goal, and a helper. So he can get himself up and in transition and up into the offensive end of the field. They lost Josh Kursan to Hopkins, so I think Kursan today is playing against his old team. And he was a solid goalie, and I was never sure. What was it? Was it the defense not playing great in front of him? Because his save percentage never equaled what I thought the hype for him was. So I never was sure if it was him just playing, maybe he's just a 55% goalie, or was it the defense maybe giving up too many easy shots in front of him? I was never sure, but they have Alec Van den Bovenkamp, who is a Furman transfer, who is a very solid goalkeeper as well. So I'm not sure he's an upgrade on Kursan. I think they're probably fairly matched skill-wise. Both of them very serviceable goalies. Kursan is definitely an upgrade, I think, for Hopkins, though. overall. So that'll be good for them. And if you look at the Hopkins side here, new coach Peter Milliman, he ditched the same school that Petro ditched to take the Hopkins job, which was Cornell. Petro was at Cornell, ditched it, ends up at Hopkins. Milliman, same thing. I believe Petro was at Cornell right before Hopkins. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, and I'll call myself out and call myself stupid. So that's a good sign. You end up with another former Cornell coach here, a very blue-collar fellow. Joey Epstein is now healthy. He only had 5 goals and 5 assists in 2020 in 4 games played. He played in 4 of their 5 games, and he looked hobbled. The season before that, as a freshman, 48 goals, 25 helpers in 2019. So a healthy Joey Epstein is why I think that Hopkins is immediately going to be better than they were last year. And like I said, I don't think Hopkins wasn't even necessarily out of the playoff hunt. Hopkins could have gone on I think Hopkins over their next 2 games, they were possibly going to be able to get back to 500 in time to maybe have a healthier Joey Epstein and get into their Big Ten play. They still could have made the playoffs and still could have done some damage into Big Ten. I didn't get everybody crapping on Hopkins as if this was like the worst season they ever had. It was the worst start in a while that they ever had, but I don't think that by the end of the season, once Epstein got healthy, they were necessarily going to be in the tank like people thought. Cole Williams, 11 goals, 6 helpers last year in 2020. He's been huge for Hop, I think, since his sophomore year. He's just a goal scoring machine, can dodge, can feed, can pretty much do it all. He cut his hair off so he doesn't look anything like he did when we all got to know him. And what I have heard via Inside Lacrosse is that he may be running out of the box, which would be crazy. Hopkins, and that's a good sign for Hopkins. If you end up bumping Cole Williams up to mid and have him run downhill out of the box, which is a strength of his, dodging downhill, down alleys, getting shots using that big frame, that's ridiculous, because what Inside Lacrosse reported was that Brendan Grimes and Connor DeSimone might end up flanking Epstein on attack, and those will be your 3 starters: Grimes, DeSimone, and Epstein. And Grimes is going to be a very good lacrosse player, so watch him today. I'm very curious to see how he does in his debut, but I expect he's going to be good for 4 points or more in his debut. I think that he's that good, and he should factor for them right away, especially getting a start at attack. Like I said, Josh Kursan, transfer keeper from Ohio State, he should be a factor in the game, and I suspect he'll be the starting goalie. And then Hopkins also got a later start than a bunch of the other teams in the Big Ten in terms of their ability to practice. So let's see if that plays into this. I suspect Ohio State has been together as a team a little bit more than Hopkins has. But the Hopkins guys are chomping at the bit to get the hell out there and beat people up. Let's see here. What do we got for questions again? So that's it for that game. That's one of the first games today. I'm torn here. I think I'm going to, after I do this live stream, I think we're going to go out to lunch with the family right around noon. So I'm going to try to bring my phone. I told my wife I'm going to bring my phone stand that I have that I can set right in the middle of the table so I can technically spend time with my family at a restaurant while watching a lacrosse game. Question. I'm going to call it now. This is from Steve D. I'm going to call it now. That first line midfield for Cuse is going to combine for 10 points this week. I think that's way under what they're going to do. You figure if they all put up a hat trick, they're already at 9 points, and you got to figure one of them is going to be good for 3-1. Another is going to be like 2-4. So I think 10 points is a good place to set the line, for an over and under, and I would take the over on that, thinking they're probably going to be somewhere in the area of 11 to 13 points combined. But I like that, Stevie D. Stevie D, that's your new name. That's what I'm going to call you. All right, so keep asking questions here, and as I get in between these games that we're going to talk about, we'll field the questions and answer them. Penn State at Rutgers, and this is a Penn State team that's going to try to prove that they're still relevant after Grant Ament. It's stupid to think they won't be. Grant Ament was a huge chunk of that offense, but I forget. I saw a tweet that led me to something where maybe it was an Inside Lacrosse article again, where they talked about Ament was only X% of the offense, and you're just going to have all these other guys that are solid now pick up the slack and carry the ball around and feed Mac O'Keefe like Ament used to. And I've said this numerous times, so anyone who watches, you're getting bored of hearing me say this, but Mac O'Keefe did not have like a huge, overwhelming percentage of his goals assisted by Grant Ament. And I remember in 2019, I counted them up, and it seemed that Grant Ament assisted about 30% or so of Mac O'Keefe's goals, and then the rest of them were generated by other guys. Mac O'Keefe is not was not ever dependent on a guy like Grant Ament. Mac O'Keefe, to a degree, is dependent on the system and making sure that guys can dodge, feed him, get separation, draw slides, things like that to disrupt the defensive scheme, allowing him to find seams when the slide packages shift the defense around. But Mac O'Keefe is the best off-ball lacrosse player that I have ever seen. Like, at least I've paid more attention to him and I've really watched his game tape. But I'd put him in terms of his off-ball play right up there with the best ever. And I think that if you really broke down his game tape and watched the things that are so subtle that he does to get himself open, you would be surprised. And I think a lot of people would be on the Mac O'Keefe is one of the top 5 off-ball attackmen ever, if not right up there in conversation for one of the top 2 or 3. So that's good. I think that Penn State's going to be fine without Ament is the moral of my story there. O'Keefe, like I said, he's the big cat returning, and he's got 21 goals to go to break the goal record in Division I lacrosse. He's going to do that in his sleep just about. Another big cat that you're going to see that's going to kind of take that next step here now that he's going to get a chance to carry the ball more is going to be Dylan Folds. He'll pick up a lot of Ament's touches and is very prepared to do so. He was 12-4 in 2020. In 2019, he was 43-13 with Ament and O'Keefe down there. And then they bring back guys like TJ Malone, Jack Kelly, Jack Trainer. These guys are younger guys, but they have a lot of offensive weapons, and I think they'll be almost as dangerous without Ament as they were with Ament, especially because these guys have all played and grown together. And then you got Gerard Arceri at the faceoff dot. So when you're a team that might be struggling to find an identity early, it's going to pay off to be able to win 65 to 70% of your faceoffs because Arceri is one of the top 5 faceoff guys in the country, and he'll do real well for Penn State. On the Rutgers side, normally we're not that worried, or at least not in the last couple of years, we're not that worried about Rutgers, but they bring everybody back from last year's team for the most part, and they add Villanova transfer Connor Kirst, 17 goals, 7 helpers in 2020 from the midfield, 31 goals and 19 helpers in 2019. He's a legit first-team All-American midfielder, veteran, huge pickup for Rutgers. And then they bring back Adam Charlambides, 15-7 in 2020. Kieran Mullins, 10-10 in 2020. He's a 50-50 guy. Charlambides, an excellent off-ball guy, two-dodger. And both return. So that's huge. Steven Russo, serviceable goalie, is back. He started last year. He's going to have to be better. I believe he's probably going to end up getting the start. He was in the area of 50%. So he needs to hit that magic number of 55%. Save more shots, make more saves than you let in goals as a goalie, and that's pretty much doing your job. And then anything you can do above that is where you start getting the goalies that win games for you. So Russo should be okay. I think Penn State's going to beat Rutgers in this game, but I don't dislike Rutgers' shot. Rutgers, especially at home, could definitely do some damage and impress some people. They're going to be a solid team. The Big Ten, it's not as deep as the ACC, and I don't think anybody would argue that, but I mean, the Big Ten is deep. You have Maryland at the top, then you have Penn State, Ohio State, Johns Hopkins right down there in the middle, and then Rutgers and Michigan. And then even Rutgers could be right there in the middle with the other teams, and then Michigan's the lowly team in the basement. And I think that's a fact. I think Michigan's the worst team in the Big. I don't think that's a hot take by any means. Back to the questions. We got MP here. What a glorious slate of games we've got on schedule for today. Let's all take a moment and be grateful for the fact that we get to watch the sport we love again. Heart emoji. I don't even know how to do emojis in YouTube. I haven't figured that out yet, and I see all you guys doing it. MP again. I've got OSU today, 14-10. I think they've got too much firepower, and Hopkins' defense still has major holes that haven't been filled. I agree. I picked Hopkins in my picks. I even earlier in the week picked Hopkins as kind of my upset alert, saying that, they're the underdog, but I think they're going to win today. But as I was kind of prepping for this and going through Ohio State's roster, I was like, oh, they bring back a lot of guys. They have a lot of offensive firepower, and, they're a good team. They were a good team, possibly a better team than Hopkins last year, and that may happen again. But we'll see. We'll see. That's why they got to play the games. So that was what did we just talk about? Rutgers and Hopkins. Next up, let's talk about Michigan at Maryland. This one, I think Maryland's going to roll. Jared Bernhardt's back. He was 20-9 last year. That's huge. However, I think even bigger than having Bernhardt back is the fact they still got Logan Wisnauskas running around on the field. He's arguably been this team's best player, at least in terms of point production. It's not arguably. I think he was their leading scorer in 2019. He was on pace to be their leading scorer last year. So he is a big boy, big attackman, great on the left side of the field there. And he can do everything, too. He can dodge. He can play off ball. He's not as adept in terms of being a handyman as Bernhardt is, because Bernhardt is truly a jack of all trades, but Wisnauskas is a jack of all trades, just in a bigger frame. Not quite the proficient dodger, but in terms of finishing capabilities, he's right up there. Bubba Fairman, one of my favorite mids in 2021. He was 5-6 last year, and he's just got a dope name, Bubba Fairman. Anthony DeMayo's back. He was 10-11 last year. So he's going to be really good, and every one of these four guys put up big points in 2019. So that core four that comes back from Maryland, they've been doing this for 2 years, 1.5 years together specifically, and now they get to do it again. Wisnauskas he was 44-35 in 2019. Bernhardt was 51-27. DeMayo was 28-18, and Bubba Fairman was 25-17. So that's pretty crazy. Brett Makar returns on defense. He's a preseason all-big selection. And in the cage, who knows? I don't know. I just know I saw Coach Tillman talking about how all the goalies look good, and this goalie looked better than he's ever looked. So I don't know who their goalie is going to be, and it probably doesn't matter because whoever they put in cage is probably going to save in the area of 53 to 57% of their shots. Maryland's defense will be solid. They've just got enough talent and athleticism down there that they're going to be fine on the defensive side of the ball. So they'll be good. Michigan, not going to probably be all that great. Now, they do have some really good pieces. My favorite being Josh Zawada, 16-16 as a freshman in 2020. He was one of the leading scorers in the country overall, and I got the chance to watch a couple of Michigan games, and he was legit. I'd like to see him put some more muscle on his body, and we've seen a lot of attackmen who have beefed up a little bit. So if Zawada beefs up a little bit, he is going to be dangerous. Will end up being one of the best attackmen in the country. By his senior year, he'll end up entering the Tewaaraton talks. He's that good. So if you end up being lucky enough to watch this Michigan-Maryland game today, pay attention to Zawada because he's a solid player. Bryce Clay, 20-2 last year. Alex Buckenavage, 11-11. He's a really good player as well. Nothing great to write home about on defense or in cage for Michigan. They didn't necessarily bring everybody back. They didn't necessarily bring in any huge recruits. So I think Maryland rolls in this one in the end. But, it's Big Ten conference play, first game of the year. So you never know what's going to happen, especially with Maryland. Anybody who's just joining here, feel free to ping me here with questions, chirp me, pick on me, whatever you want to do. Another game that is going to be important to watch today is Georgetown at Villanova. I think that's how they're playing it. Georgetown, I don't want to call people sleepers. People overuse the whole sleeper thing here now. Georgetown just is a team that traditionally isn't talked about a whole lot, but they bring back Jake Caraway, one of the best attackmen in the country. They have no more Kirst for Villanova. So coming into this game, Villanova's without their best player from last year, but Georgetown has all their guys back. They still have Matt Campbell at midfield for Villanova, so they're not going to be totally down. But Georgetown, one of the best defensive teams in the country here. LSM Alex Mazzone, defender Gibson Smith, goalie Owen McElroy. They're covering it between the boxes at close D and in the cage. They actually have a couple of really good short stick D mids that I talked about when I previewed them earlier in the year. I expect Georgetown to win this game, but it could be close. Villanova's known for doing damage early. They've upset Yale. I was at a game where Villanova beat Syracuse, I think, at the Dome. That was many years ago, though. But Villanova's solid defensively themselves. Patrick Kennedy leads the way for them on defense. So they're not going to be pushovers by any means, but I think Georgetown is really good. And being that this is a conference rival, these guys know each other. I think that Georgetown's going to handle it. I don't think you're going to see the trickery out of Villanova where they're going to upset somebody, because I would say that Georgetown is in fact the obvious favorite here. Virginia at Loyola. Now, I think Virginia's going to win this game, but Loyola is solid. I just want to see how Loyola, was that Richmond game a defensive battle? Because it didn't, the stats didn't indicate that both teams played like hot trash. The stats indicated that there was some turnovers. There was a good amount of goalie saves on top of it, though. There was a lot of possessions burned all the way down to the end of the shot clock. So the fact that was such a low-scoring game, Did it mean that the teams were sloppy, not playing great offensively, or did it mean that they're just really good defensive teams? Because that's what Loyola is hoping to prove against Virginia, that they're just a really good defensive team. They're going to slow the game down a little bit, take care of the ball against a UVA defense that's going to pressure them all over the field. I think that Loyola has the pieces in play that they're more capable of stinging Virginia as they play over aggressive defense than Army was, just because Army's got Nick Turn and then a bunch of guys that we don't fully know how they're going to pan out yet, whereas Loyola has Kevin Lindley, who bailed Loyola out last week, scoring 3 goals over the course, I think he scored their last 3 goals to tie the game and win the game. And then you got Aiden Olmstead, who's a more than capable Dodger, could be their best player, despite Lindley getting the number 7 moniker here. But then UVA has the known quantities. Peyton Cormier has been a beast for UVA, and right now Peyton Cormier looks like their best player. But Matt Moore's back. He looked good against Army. I think he had a hat trick against Army last weekend. Schellenberger ran out of the box as a midfielder last week and played well. I think he ended up 1-2 in that game. Aiken got a goal, and every week I think Dox Aiken's going to be better. You know, that's how it goes. I expect UVA to win because I think their defense, Kaloji, Connors, and co. I think they're just too good, I think. But in the end, I think Loyola is a good team that can give Virginia some fits throughout the day, but expect UVA to probably pull away 2-4 goals somewhere in that area. All right, let's see here. We got some questions now. Brady Palmer says, hope Hopkins turns things around this year. I agree. Michael Bacaletz, who's the grittiest in the CAA? Who do you see winning the conference? You're saying it right. Bacaletz. Hey, I got it. Bacaletz. Can you bury? Okay, then we got. I'll get to your question about the CAA. I just haven't looked into any of the CAA teams overall yet because I haven't previewed them. Can you bury ESPN Plus and their ESPN ACC network? BS. We pay for ESPN Plus, yet some of the providers don't have ACC network. Why are we paying then? Yeah, that stinks. But you know, the ESPN Plus, you're still gaining what, like 5 to 8 games a weekend. Once the season really gets in there, I think you end up seeing like 4 to 6 games a week end up being on ESPN Plus, and then ESPN on top of it. Like I don't play or hate the pay to play scheme because it's expensive to put these productions on to a degree and get them out to you and stream it to you, and the bandwidth is expensive. I'm a web guy, I'm a web developer, so I understand what it takes to do it. And it's just like when I was a kid, we didn't get to watch shit. When I was a kid, the only lacrosse that was on TV when I was like in high school was the national championship and maybe the a tournament game. So you got to watch Memorial Day weekend on TV, and that was about it, at least in my area. And now, any given weekend, I mean, I was watching a freaking scrimmage last night. I literally watched D2 Tampa scrimmage themselves last night on a live stream for like an hour. You know, so it's like we do live in a world where there is a boatload of lacrosse to watch, more than I ever had available to me when I was a kid. So I think that more people need to be like, it stinks that I might not get to watch that game, but get a new provider. Like, I mean, if you don't have the ACC network and you want it, ditch your provider and get I use YouTube TV. So I have YouTube TV, I get the ACC network, so I get to watch all those games, and then I'll end up buying the Big Ten subscription for the games that aren't on there. So I buy every subscription out there. I bought freaking the Denver thing last week so I could watch that, or maybe that wasn't one. It was Denver's first game this year that I ended up buying their package so I could watch their first home game. You know, you just got to do what you got to do. Let's see here. I've already lost my spot. As a Michigan fan, I'm hoping it's not a blowout. I don't think it'll be a blowout there, Goob Scraggy. I think it'll be a 5 to 8 goal game. So I mean that's kind of a blowout, but I don't think they're going to get totally embarrassed. I think it'll be a slow burn to defeat in the end. Liam Linden, do you think Gray wins the Twarton over Sowers? I think that right now, if we had to vote, it goes to Chris Gray, hands down. UNC's looked incredible. Offensively, their output has just been ridiculous. Gray's output has been ridiculous. And I don't think the Twarton voters all know the game like they should know the game, because one thing that's going to be really difficult for Sowers versus Gray, when UNC is rolling somebody, they've got their starters in right to the end, you know, and they'll eventually get guys in. Duke pulled their entire starting attack line before the end of the first quarter against Mercer last week. So good luck to Mike Sowers trying to outscore Chris Gray when he's getting put on the bench with 4 minutes left in the first quarter because they're already starting to roll Mercer. And that's just a coaching philosophy difference. Coach D doesn't want to put it on a team like Mercer. He doesn't care if his guys end up with 7 or 9 points in that game, which Sowers, I think he had, 6 in that game? If he had played the whole game, he would have ended up with 10 or whatnot. And that's the kind of crap you're going to need if it becomes a scoring race. I think that what Coach D is counting on and what Sowers' best chance is that they're getting better. They're doing a little bit more work. I did talk about the difference in defensive strategies between Duke and North Carolina and how Duke's strategy is naturally going to improve a defender in terms of his one-on-one capabilities more than UNC's early season strategy was going to. So I think that's the goal here, is that Mike Sowers simply needs Duke to advance further than North Carolina in the tournament, and he'll do his thing and he'll get it. But I think it's a battle between those two, and I think everybody else can just sit down just about. I don't think anyone else is going to be seriously considered because these two are just so much better. All right, let's see here. Has Duke had enough time to fix their issues for this week's matchup against Towson, or will be another Robert Morris outing? I mean, Towson's not. I don't think Towson's as good as Robert Morris. I think Towson was 0-6 last year, on their way to being 0-8, maybe 0-9. I don't think Towson got that much better, so I don't think Towson's a great lacrosse team. Robert Morris is a good lacrosse team. So, no, I don't. I think that Duke is going to – I think you're going to probably see something similar to the Mercer game with Duke running away, Duke playing a lot of guys. I want to say I saw somewhere that Duke played 30-plus guys in that a game against Mercer, which is crazy. North Carolina didn't play that many guys in any of their blowout wins. I say that now, and I'm probably wrong. All right, let's see here. I know, Phil, we all want to watch the ACC. I do too. MP, if the voting was today, yes. Too early to tell, though. I agree. Hugo Peterson, what will be the most surprising thing about the Cuse this year? I don't know. I think that it's going to be interesting to see who ends up getting all the burns at attack. Right now, it does kind of sound like they're going to go with the original starting 3 attackmen from last year's team, which would be Cook, Rafis, and Scanlon. I thought you might see Hiltz break into that starting lineup, and I thought you might see Cook end up getting dumped to second line midfield, which would not at all be a bad thing, because that second line midfield with Quinn and Buttermore, they need a third guy on it. Griffin Cook has experience playing midfield as he did his freshman year, so I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see him running with that second midfield line as Hiltz is playing attack. I'm not sure. I hope that the most surprising thing, though, is that our defense ends up being a top 15 defense. I think our defense is still a little bit of a question mark. We know we have athletes there that can hang, and we know that we're good enough, and our goalie, and Porter is good enough. But, yeah, I don't know. I think the most surprising thing, hopefully, is that our defense ends up being top 15. At the end of the day, I think it comes down to talent and coaching support. Who do you think has the best of both? I mean, honestly, I think Duke probably overall. I think you look at Duke and what Coach D has done there in terms of player development, in terms of winning titles and continuing to win and continuing to be relevant. I think that probably Duke has the best mix of coaching talent and then player talent overall. I think that's not a hot take or whatnot. And then who has the most stable lines and hot shot individual talent? The entire ACC. I right down all the way to Notre Dame included in that mix. I mean, the ACC is loaded all across the board. I don't think we've probably seen 5 teams sitting atop the lacrosse world that are as good as these ACC teams are. And then you throw in some Marylands and some teams from other conferences. This is a very top-heavy it's one of the best displays of college lacrosse talent I think that we're ever going to see, just because we retained so much. We've got 5 years of talent built into some of these rosters. All right, so we talked about Virginia. Well, now naturally we get to talk about Army and Syracuse. So we've already talked about the Cuse a lot. First midline, one of the best lines in the country, Dordovic, Trimboli, and Curry. Pick your poison there. I saw someone talking about who are they going to pull. Actually, I did a radio show, the Syracuse radio preview with the I forget what is it, WAEN or something like that, and Anish Shroff was one of the guests, and then Anish Shroff, which it just doesn't make sense that I even get to be mentioned in the same sentence as him. He was talking about who do you pull? Who do you end up polling when Syracuse has that first midfield line and that attack on? I think the answer ends up being you may see scenarios with teams pull all 3 mids and put shorties on Scanlon and maybe Rafis. Rafis has been short-sticked before. Scanlon has definitely been short-sticked before, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if they pulled all three Cuse midfielders. So that could happen. The attack, like I said, Rafis, Scanlon, and Cook look like they're going to be the starters, but expect Hiltz to get rotated in. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Hiltz eventually maybe start, just because Cook hasn't put up Cook looked really good last year. He was their best riding attackman, and he was one of the reasons that ride was so effective. Dude just ran around all over the place, but he didn't put up big points. He was on pace to have a solid season, but if you got a dude like Hiltz who could maybe put up 20, 30 points, without batting an eye, you may end up going that way. Now, the key for Army in this game is going to be Schupler. Schupler he's stood on his head the last couple of years. Syracuse has a problem over time with Army goalies, no matter who they are, just robbing them left and right. So Schupler's going to be key. It's too early here, and I drink a bunch of coffee in the morning, and I end up getting dry mouth as I'm talking to you. And then Cuse has to keep Brendan Nichtern quiet for Army. They should be able to handle that, though. They'll devote some resources to that. And then it looks like Kennedy, Murphy, and DiPietro are going to be the starting close D. Hapney, the Utah kid, will be filling in as the fourth pole. Drake Porter is going to be able to equal Schupler. As long as he can equal Schupler, Cuse is going to be fine, and they should win this game. I think that in this one, we're going to talk about it here. And actually, let's just get into that now. I'm going to change my screen here to this. Now, if we're looking at these lines here, which you guys are now looking at, that very first one at the top there, I would end up taking, I'm just going to rip through and tell you what I would take. Let's start with the Cuse game, though. Cuse at -4 over Army. I would end up taking Army at +4 in that game. I'm going to butcher this, and I might not say the plus or minus right, but you guys will all get the idea what the hell I'm talking about here. Who's the next Matt Rambo? Well, right now, he's not shaped like Matt Rambo. This is from Bo, I'm not even going to... Bo and the Lizards. Who's the next Matt Rambo? Cormier. I mean, it's not Matt Rambo. It's more like a Cloutier. But I think that Cormier is the next big beast, just dominating people. He looked really good against Army in that game. So as I'm looking at this, Cuse at -4, I would take Army at +4. I think that Syracuse is going to win that game, but I like Army being able to stay inside that spread there. Let's see what else we got. Penn State and Rutgers at 3 there. I'm going to take Penn State. I would take Penn State at -3. I think that they will cover there. Ohio State and Hopkins, I think that's going to be a dogfight. I think I would end up taking, if I was to try to take a bet on this, because in terms of the head-to-head, I'm not sure how it's going to pan out, but I would end up taking Hopkins at +3 against Ohio State. DeHoga. Oh, no, DeHoga. Listen, DeHoga Nanakoke is a hell of a lacrosse player, and I'm a huge DeHoga Nanakoke fan. DeHoga Nanakoke is nowhere near the player that Matt Rambo is. And this is going to sound like an insult against DeHoga, and it is not meant to, but it is an insult to Matt Rambo to compare him to DeHoga, because the only thing they have in common may be their body size. But Rambo was an All-American, Tewaaraton winner, led his team to a national title, and was the best player on the field. And then look what he's done in the PLL, winning championships in the PLL as I think, what is he, the 2-time MVP of the PLL? DeHoga isn't necessarily even a guaranteed PLL player. DeHoga is going to move on, and he's going to be a great NLL player for sure. He's going to play some pro box, and he's going to tear it up. And like I said, none of this was to cut him up. It was just to get Goob Scraggy back on point and have him not try to compare DeHoga to Matt Rambo, because those two things are not the same. All right, here, Denver. -4 over Marquette, and I'd take Denver at -4 for that. Maryland over Michigan here. I would end up taking Maryland at -5.5 over Michigan. Duke Towson. Now here's the tough one. I think this Duke Towson one, if you're a betting man, I think this is the dangerous one, because the problem ends up being Duke is definitely 7.5 goals better than Towson. Duke is probably 10 goals better than Towson. The problem is, will Duke put it on Towson by design that badly? And I'm just not sure that Duke is going to do that. Like I said, Duke pulled their entire starting attack line and got all 3 younger attackmen 4 minutes of burn in the first quarter of that Michigan game. It is just really hard to beat a team by 7 or 10 goals plus when you're not, when you're not trying to do so. So I think that's the trap. I would end up, if I had to, I would end up taking Duke at -7.5, but that could be a big loser for you, because I wouldn't be surprised to see Duke just come out and win 14-7, because that's all they try to do. Virginia and Loyola. Virginia at -5 over Loyola. I think in this one, I think that's a very fair line. I think I'd end up having to take Loyola at +5, thinking that they're going to cover that. Syracuse Army, definitely taking Army at +4, because I think that Syracuse is going to win the game, but I think Army is going to probably keep it within 2 to 3 goals, as they usually do. So that's a huge one. Georgetown Villanova. 5. I'd end up taking Villanova at +5 in this one, because I think that they'll end up covering. Carolina Richmond, I would end up taking Carolina at -4 in that. And then Lehigh Albany got canceled, so that's not even going to play. See, and that was one of my reasons. One of the reasons I wanted to not do the preview show anymore on Wednesday was because there's going to be so much lacrosse played every week, and I'm not going to be able to cover everything in Sunday's recap show. And then there's a lot of Sunday games that end up getting played. So I think that that's smart, because we don't know what games are going to get canceled. I don't want to spend 20, 30 minutes preparing for and then talking about a game that doesn't even end up happening. So I like doing it this morning, where we were pretty sure all these games are going to happen. Excuse me. Another question here. Is there even a Matt Rambo level taken in the pool? I don't know what you're asking there. Matt Ragnow, you've mentioned Georgetown and Nova. Denver had some early season struggles, but who do you have winning the Big East? I think Denver or Georgetown will. Right now, the way Denver's looked so far, I would end up siding with Georgetown, and we haven't even seen them play yet. But Denver's going to get better. Denver's talent is there. Hannah, Morrill, Walker, Sullivan. They've got a lot of talent on that team. They have talent on the defensive end of the side of the ball also. I just think that Georgetown is much better defensively. I think Georgetown is definitely the best defensive team in the Big East, and offensively, Denver hasn't looked so great. So Georgetown looked good offensively last year as well. So I like Georgetown. And then Georgetown picks up Bowen from North Carolina, I believe, next year. So Georgetown is a team that is kind of doing really well. They're doing the right stuff here. And that's it for the questions. And then let me see, what else did I want to look at here? Was there anything else? Okay, let me just make sure I didn't miss any more of these games here. I'm gonna switch it back so you can see my screen. Stony Brook and Bryant. I like Stony Brook in this one. Stony Brook is a really good club. They've been good for a while now. I liked what Nagel did. I was surprised when Nagel stepped down at Stony Brook, and because there was no reason for it. At first, I was like, oh man, they fired Nagel, and they were doing well at that time. He had them, more relevant than they had been in a while. We talked about these ones. Delaware, New Jersey IT. Who cares? Sorry. I don't know enough about either of them. I think Denver beats Marquette today, but I think Marquette has a quality squad, but I still don't think they're Denver level. So I think you end up seeing Denver handle their business similarly to how they handled Air Force. Hofstra, Sacred Heart. I like Hofstra. I tell you what, man, Ryan Tierney, what did he do? Let's take a look at this. Ryan Tierney goes 8-3 against St. John's last week. But if you watch, and if we kind of go through his season last year, 7 games, and he had 35 points in 7 games. That's not too bad. And then if you look at what he did against the good teams that he played, which there are a handful of them, 1-1, so that wasn't that great. Maybe he's not going to prove my point for me. 4-3 against St. John's last year, so apparently Ryan Tierney just has this thing with beating up on St. John's. 3-1 against Stony Brook. So he didn't tear it up as much as I thought he did, but he would have. He would have, and that's the moral of the story. Ryan Tierney is a hell of a lacrosse player, so any chance you get to watch Hofstra, do so. Boston U, Merrimack, I have no idea, except that Boston U is probably going to win this game, even without Chris Gray. Utah, Air Force, that should be a dogfight, actually, and I said it, and I'm going to stick with this. I'm not going to pick against Utah until they give me a really good reason to do so. So I like Utah in this game. Like I said, if their young guys can keep playing stupid, just stupid enough to not know that they should be scared, then they could end up overachieving like they have so far. So I'm going with Utah until they drop a bad one, because I told their whoever runs their Twitter account that I would, and he forgave me for questioning them. You think Goob Scraggy? You think Merrimack is going to beat Boston? Boston U? You got to clarify that, man. I don't think that's going to happen. Anyway, and if it does, I'll send you a T-shirt. Oh yeah, we got to do the T-shirt before the end of this too. Hope I don't forget. Duke Towson, we talked about Mercer, Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville's going to put it on Mercer. Let's say 5-8 goal spread or so. Could be worse if they decide to just beat them up badly, like Duke didn't. And St. Joseph's UMBC is postponed. And then we have a bunch of games Sunday that I didn't get into. The U-Albany Lehigh got canceled. North Carolina Richmond, I touched on it a little bit. I think North Carolina is going to beat Richmond, possibly by a margin in that. Providence St. John's, I'd go St. John's. I do picks, and I keep forgetting. Oh, it's a hot take. Goob Scraggy is saying it's a hot take that he's picking Merrimack. I'm not going to make that hot take. So, yeah, that is our games, guys. I've been rambling for 40 minutes. The last thing that I wanted to do here, and we are going to do this, is we are going to go to cut to here. We are going to go here. One thing I wanted to show was we may have a little bit of a what do you call it? A blueprint on how to disrupt North Carolina's offense here. One of the things you're going to see, we're going to see a pick. You already saw the pick take place. It ends up screwing Bowen up. And UNC plays a lot of really crazy help defense, and they have thus far. But in the High Point game, their defense just did not look as good. Now, it could just be because High Point, they're a bunch of beasts. But if you watch this, that pick screwed this guy up here, and now we have to have help come, and it's a shorty who's going to come over here and try to guard the big boy, Asher Nolting, and it just does not work for him. Now, we're going to have another instance of it here, where now you can see the pick a little bit better transpire. So the pick takes place right here. He's going to run through it. Oh, disruptive. Look at the step he has. We have this guy here who is now trying to kind of keep up and help. And as Nolting progresses, we just have enough confusion in the defense between the two guys paying attention to Nolting. We get a cutter, backdoor cut, score. So the moral of that story is I think you're going to end up seeing a lot more teams run that back picks on North Carolina, and that could open up a lot of holes on their defense because thus far they have played really good help defense, and they're going to have to against teams like Duke, Syracuse, and Virginia. So maybe you're going to see a lot of teams do that. So I'm wondering if we'll see Richmond do that against North Carolina as well. They have some capable attackmen and not nearly as capable as the ACC teams, but still pretty capable. And that is a little wrinkle that we may see Richmond do today to try to gain a little bit of an edge out back and on that defense. So that's it, guys. It's 10:47. I think there's games that are going to start here. Do we have as our first game at noon? First game's not till noon, but I need to grab a beer and get myself out to lunch. So I'm ditching. As always, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. If you're watching this right now and you're not subscribed, let's see if we can get like 5 subscribers in a minute. Just subscribe right now. It is super easy to do. It costs you nothing, and it will make my soul feel a little better. You can go to LaxFactor.com. We got t-shirts, hoodies, hats. I'm kind of all decked out like a moron today. I'm a poster child for myself, which I guess isn't a bad thing to be. But I will be back tomorrow. You know what? We are not going to do the weekend review show tomorrow because there's too many games on Sunday. So we are going to hold. Do not come back tomorrow. What we're going to do is Monday morning, the weekend preview show is going to come out because that way we'll be able to preview or review every game that took place over this weekend. And then Wednesday, we'll figure it out and regroup after that. So you know what? Forget that. We are going to do a recap show for today's games tomorrow, but maybe what I'll do is instead of cutting it up, I'll do a live stream for that one, and then we'll do the nicer one on Monday. So expect a show both tomorrow morning and Monday morning because we just have way too many games to recap, and I want to recap a shitload of them. So that's what we're going to do. So come back tomorrow morning. We'll have our today's games recapped, and then come back Monday morning, and we're going to also recap the games from Sunday. So that's what we'll do, and that is it. Thanks for watching. As always, now I got to do this weird thing where I exit. So what I'm going to do this time is say, Hoost is out. The LaxFactor Podcast.